Welcome to the Soulful Badass podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Jackson, an intuitive success coach from the UK, and I'm here to help entrepreneurs, leaders, and soul-aligned goddesses to create epic levels of success and impact in your life and your business. So if that sounds good to you, make sure you are tuning in every week for mindset talk, manifestation, magic, and incredible interviews with other soul-aligned entrepreneurs. So hit the subscribe button, and I'd love to invite you to come and join the Soulful Badass community. All the links are in the show notes. Please go and click them, and I'll see you in there. Hi there, welcome to this week's podcast. This week, I was thinking about what to talk about on the podcast, and I've had lots of conversations with people around challenges that are happening in their life. And then I've just pulled a card and it said, I am capable of overcoming any challenge that comes my way. And I just thought that was so perfect, especially about what I wanted to talk about tonight, because with this podcast and what's coming through for me at the moment is there's so many of us feeling really dragged down emotionally or feeling the fear of things that are in the future. So we often get hung up on the detail and the how, and we get stuck in the wondering, how am I ever going to overcome that challenge? How am I ever going to make things happen? How am I ever going to choose that path when I can't see the end result? And it comes up a lot, and especially with coaching women when they want to take a big leap, they want to make a big move, but they don't see how they could possibly do that themselves, or they could possibly move down that certain path, the path that your soul is calling you to go down, because you can't see how you're going to make it possible. Now, when it comes to following your soul-aligned desires and that soul path, the problem with it is we don't get given a step-by-step guide of how to get from here to there. We don't get given all of the instructions that we want when we're about to take a leap into the unknown. We get told snippets of information. So when you're following your soul path, you get a desire. That desire might not make any sense to your logical mind, and it might not make any sense to your ego. So you following this desire lets your ego flood you with possibilities. It lets your ego flood you with all the what ifs, the wherefores, the whether tos, all of those that make you go, well, how the hell am I ever going to make that possible? But you will never know until you take that first step of how you're going to make it possible. You will never know the outcome until you take that first step. You'll never know what you're going to need next. So whilst you are in this logical way of thinking, of trying to understand and figure everything out, what the ego is doing to you, which is super clever, is keeping you stuck. Is stopping you moving forward, which is exactly what it wanted to do in the first place. So your ego's job is to keep you where you are. So as soon as you get a soul desire comes through, and it could be to do something, it could be to leave your job, it could be to start your business, it could be to write a course, it could be to leave a relationship, it could be all sorts of things that your soul desire is calling you to do. You suddenly get flooded with, well, the how are you going to make that happen? How are you going to make money from that? How are you going to write that course? How are you going to put that course out? How are you going to charge for it? How are you going to leave that relationship? How are you going to have the money to do that? All this stuff that it wants you to figure out before you take any action. And the thing is, you are never going to know the right next step until you take that leap. The same thing happened with me when I did leave my relationship, my marriage years ago. At the time, all the work up until that point, all the thoughts, all the logician mindset, all the ego kicking in was telling me, how could I ever possibly make it work? I wasn't financially set up in order to do that, for us to split off our household. I wasn't in a position where I felt I could do that emotionally, or he was in that position. There was all of these things coming up to tell me to not do it. And I never had a plan. I didn't have a plan to say this is all going to work out perfectly. What I did do was I projected this was all going to work out perfectly. We were going to be friends. It was going to be amicable. It was going to be the best for both of us. This was the thought pattern I projected into that. But I didn't have a plan of how any of it would work. I didn't know how we could split off the household. I didn't know where he was going to go and live. I didn't know anything. So what I had to do was just have that conversation to say it was over. And then after the conversation, all of the steps come to light with what was available to us, what was able to happen. We were able to figure everything out. We were able to overcome all the challenges. But if I had sat there and tried to figure anything out, people wouldn't have said, oh, I have this house you could rent, or I have this, or I have that, because the door wasn't open to it. It's the same with the business. When I started the business, I had all these ideas of, well, I'm not, I want to be as big as Tony Robbins, but then I'm not a millionaire. So how can I talk about manifesting? This was the conversation that my mindset was going through, and my logician mind was telling me, how can you talk about manifesting or be a manifesting coach where you're not actually manifesting the big money? Who's going to take you seriously? This was what was happening before I even started my business. So it stopped me starting my business for a long time until I realized I'm never going to be at that status until I start a business doing the thing I want to do. So my ego was perfect, keeping me stuck in the, well, don't even start a business because you're not rich enough yet. Like, can you understand how much bollocks that is? Don't start a business because you're not rich enough yet. Like, what? Yeah, this was my ego thoughts. So whatever it is, your mind is going to come up with lots of different scenarios, lots of different obstacles, lots of different things that are going to hinder you and keep you stuck. But you are capable of overcoming every single challenge. But you will never know what the challenge is going to be until you take the first step. Your mind will come up with all of the scenarios it thinks that might happen, but you're never going to know until you take that first step. You're never going to know what the challenges you're going to face. You're never going to know what the business is going to be like until you start it. You're never going to know what the course is going to be like until you start running it. You're never going to know what your life's like without a certain person until you take that leap and tell them. There's all of these things that you get stuck in the waiting and the procrastination. And actually, all you're doing is hurting yourself more because your ego thoughts are really debilitating. They drag you down, they make you feel crap. And often when you get to a certain point, you don't feel the way that your ego's told you you're going to feel. I know when I had all this build up to the reaction I thought I was going to get, I had all these scenarios playing out in my head of how it was going to work when me and my husband split. And actually, when I got to that point, I didn't feel any of the things that I thought I was going to feel. I felt a completely different way. I felt a level of peace, a level of release, because it was the right thing to do. And that whole build-up of energy and stories that my ego told me I would feel, and all of the emotion, it didn't happen how my ego thought. It was heart-wrenching, but it also gave me a release, like a feeling of peace. And ultimately, it was the best thing for both people involved. So same with my business. As soon as I started it, I wasn't feeling overwhelmed or underconfident or all the things that my ego was telling me I would feel. I just started it and then started enjoying it and then enjoying it more and then doing a different thing and then enjoying that. And it's grown and evolved. And it's now completely different to when I first started. And that's okay. But I would never have got to the point I am today if I hadn't have just started back in the beginning. So whatever it is that's been keeping you stuck, whatever it is that you really want to do, but that fear has been keeping you stuck somewhere, you need to ask yourself, all those scenarios, all those things that your ego is telling you, they're not actually true. And when it comes to the real obstacles, the real challenges, once you take the action, you'll be able to face anything that comes your way and you'll be able to overcome anything that comes your way. So please do not stay in this stuckness, in this energy of waiting, in this torture, because that's what it is. It's your mind torturing you to keep you stuck. And if you stay in this torturous place, it's only you sitting in your ego. And if you feel bad, it's because you're allowing yourself to sit there and you're not taking the action towards your aligned soul path. When you take action on your soul path, it actually feels good. It feels divinely guided. It feels like a level of peace. It feels like a knowing. It's completely different to the agony that your ego keeps you in. It is like a mind torture chamber that your ego will keep you in. If there's a big decision you're needing to make, it will keep you in that torture chamber, but you've got to fight through and make the decision, because ultimately that's where the peace comes. That's where you can overcome any obstacle. That is where you can work through anything. You can't do that when they're all built up scenarios in your mind, because they will always bring in something else. So when you're in this ego space of literally sitting in your mind and trying to think of every scenario, you'll get one answer and then it'll bring up another problem. And then you'll get that answer and it'll bring up another problem. You will sit in this constant turmoil of it. You can never make it work. Whereas actually you can always make it work. And now is the time to trust and take action towards your path. You were born to make massive impact in this world, and you're not going to do that being stuck in your ego. So please take some soul aligned action today. Follow what lights you up and start walking that soul path, knowing you are capable of overcoming any challenges. You've got this. If you need any help with this, please grab a copy of Becoming Unstoppable or book a session with me, but have the best day and know that you are incredible and you were born for greatness. Catch you next week. Bye.